Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather here with my co host, Preston Chandler. Together, we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation coaching and strategy. Today's guests, we've got two today, are Dr. Julia Moore and Dr. Sobia Khan from the Center for Implementation, a global social enterprise that helps individuals and organizations turn evidence into action. While both are trained academics, they're known in the field as rogue scientists because they don't just study change, they make it happen. Julia and Sobia are internationally recognized for making implementation science practical, and I know this is a surprise, but actually usable, translating dense research into simple, actionable strategies that drive real world results. Together, they've supported over 200 change initiatives across health, education, and human services, and they've trained more than 10,000 change makers in over 100 countries. Their work has influenced organizations like the World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation, and the CDC, not by adding more theory, but by helping the people apply what we already know to create better systems, stronger outcomes, and lasting impact. Julia and Sobia, I have high expectations for this conversation. I think it's going to be a blast.
Agreed.
Welcome to the
Agreed.
show.
Thank you. Thanks, JL and Preston. We're super excited to be here.
Awesome. So,
Great.
maybe a great place to start, since you've trained so many professionals across sectors, countries, you name it. What's the most common misconception out there about implementing change?
I think that the most common misconception about implementing change is that you can just tell people to do things and they'll do it. It's actually really surprising. So part of the work that I do for the Gates Foundation is review protocols for implementing different programs or evaluating different programs, and I provide feedback. And the number of people who are like, "Well, we planned it and now they're going to do it." It's
Poof,
incredible, right? Like, well, we have the templates, we have the documents, we have the plans. That means they're just gonna do it, not
all the checks.
recognizing that implementation is change. Like it's about changing behavior, it's about changing systems, and change is super hard. It's incredibly hard. It's incredibly complex. And so there's a lot of things you have to pay attention to. There's a lot of social capital that goes into change. There's a lot of relationships and relationship building that goes into change. There's a lot of aspects of leadership that's not transactional but transformational that goes into change. And so I think that like that's to me the biggest misconception is that you can just tell people what to do and they're going to do it.
I feel like building on that, people also don't realize there's actually a science behind how we can do that, that people could use to make it easier to make that change happen. And it makes it that they would be less reliant on those strategies that they love. Like Sophie and I love to talk about how people love to train and pray and hope that that is how change is going to happen. That's kind of the most common strategy out there, but that there actually is evidence about what works. There's evidence about how we can set up systems, infrastructure, and support people through change while adapting to the context, all the different things that have to happen, but people don't even realize that's out there and can help them.
So, JL, I'm hoping that what we learned today reinforces what you and I do instead it proves us all wrong. So I'm intrigued.
Well, it's funny to me. So, listening to you both talk about it, if I were going to distill this down, change is about behavior, not process. And it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of complexity in that because human behavior is not a simple concept. So I'm curious, when you're working with these companies, with these organizations, how do you help leaders make that mindset shift that are not changing process, they're not changing the organization, they're changing people's behavior?
Well, I feel like Sobi and I have this interesting, so we're both trained implementation scientists, but we come at it from two different angles. And I feel like that really helps when we're thinking through these pieces. So I love individual behavior change into organizational change. And Sobia loves to think about like systems change and complexity into organization. And I feel like the types of changes we're talking about aren't just an individual changing, but often individuals, the organizations, and the systems changing. And so it's thinking about like how all those pieces get woven together and recognizing that humans, organizations, and systems are not often just simple. And so figuring out how we're going to support people to change, their barriers to change. There's a process, ironically, behind how to do that.
And just to add to that, so it's interesting because we say this as a joke, but it's also kind of turned into a thing that we do, which is we often have to provide implementation therapy, quote unquote.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's
there's a
familiar.
huge like psychological and emotional component of implementation that people don't really pay attention to. Because they treat it like a process, as you're saying, JL. They're like, oh, we have a process in place and then we're just going to execute the process and that's it. And part of the support work that we do is actually hearing people out and trying to understand where they're coming from in terms of the fact that implementation never follows a linear process, that you have to go back and forth, that there is that behavior change component. There are things you can't control, but there are things that you have power over. And what are those things that you have power over that you can actually exert and that you can actually do something about when you're trying to make change? And so a lot of that is a lot of support work that helps navigate through the psychology and emotion of change. And so, yeah, that's it's become one of our informal support services is
Yeah.
implementation therapy.
Well, and you used an interesting word, control, right? And I think
Yeah.
so much of this is more about influence than control. I think that's another mindset shift that I would love to see in leaders.
Yeah.
Maybe can you talk to us about an example where you've seen some of those shifts happen and how did that work?
Yeah, so I would say this is probably one of our biggest questions that people get is I have no authority, so how do I make change happen? And we tell people all the time, we literally never have authority over anything ever because of our roles. We never ever
Yeah.
have authority. But we've created lots of change. We support other people to create change because in fact, it is more powerful to create change with influence than it is to create change with authority. And so I know that certain sectors that's really hard mind shift. I did a lot of work in infection prevention and control pre-pandemic, but then again post-pandemic. And the mindset is very much like we want to control and helping people shift to thinking, ooh, how do we have influence instead of thinking about this as an authority or control situation has been very powerful. And how they think about like, what are the things that we can do to improve, in that case, infection prevention and control. But it's true across, I mean, we work across sectors and it's true across sectors.
No, and I love that. I think infection control feels like a very technical area, different than what we normally talk about, which is like in the software implementation or product area. Maybe what are some of the tools that leaders should be using or investing in, both in terms of time, learning, as well as money, to help themselves kind of navigate the space?
I mean, okay, so I'm biased, but I think that all leaders should be equipped with some competency in implementation science. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think that even if you're not a frontline implementer, you're not the person who's actually embedding the software into an organization or doing the implementation work in a healthcare organization. If you're a leader, you have to understand how to support it. And so I think having some sort of leadership competency around implementation and what makes transformation happen in an organization and what good implementation looks like could be incredibly helpful. And we provide tons of tools and resources for this. So the Center for Implementation, we love providing or developing tools. And our tools are all like easily accessible. They're meant for teams. They're meant for people to work together through problems together to problem solve. And so, for example, if the goal is to be adaptive, we have a tool where you can work for and plan through adaptations together. And I think approaching things as teams, as collaboratives, and not like the lone leader who's going to make change happen, but like we are in this together and supporting the teams through those difficult challenges and implementation using these tools is really helpful. So that's one thing that I would say, and I'll pass it off to Julia if you have additions there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like there's like the two sides of the coin to make change happen. There's like this piece that we've been talking about, which is like, how do we change behavior? And so understanding like at the core of what we teach and work with people, and in fact, our most used tool is helping people understand what are the barriers people are experiencing to change and what are strategies that directly address those barriers. In the same way that like reminders are a great strategy if memory is your barrier. Except memory is rarely the barrier that people are facing. And so we need different strategies than training and reminders often. But then I think there's this human element to change, this whole interactions between people, the idea that like we need to build relationships, we need to build trust, and often navigate a lot of power dynamics. I know that Sobia and I spend a huge amount of time digging into the science of trust and power, which are integral. So it's kind of like you need to balance those relationship pieces with this kind of more technical piece of like, what are people's barriers? What are the organizational barriers? And how can we address those? And they don't have to know the nitty gritty, but understanding that both of those are definitely necessary to move forward.
I think a lot of what you're saying totally is in line with what JL and I feel and talk about day to day. I mean, eerily similar. One thing that Sobia that you mentioned, it makes me think that you're advocating for a different role of leadership. Instead of leaders that are taking control and making all the decisions, it feels to me like you're suggesting a leader who is responsible for influencing change. And to me, that's a dramatic shift. Talk to me a little bit about how you see that shift and how most leaders see that shift.
So I think the problem with leadership is that we tend to see it as top down, that there's a visible authority with leadership, that they have to make certain kinds of decisions to move forward, which is true. Like and that is how organizations tend to operate now. But the best alignment between implementation or good implementation and a type of leadership is the transformational leader and the adaptive leader. Because we know that implementation never, as we said at the beginning of this, it's never linear. You're going to stray off course. There's going to be things that influence implementation or impact implementation and veer you off course. Like, for example, the current context. Like, a lot of people are like, wow, oh, there's a lot happening in the world. How do we continue with the things that we have been doing? How do we have to adapt? How do we navigate this? And so you have to have leaders that are comfortable with that uncertainty, comfortable with adapting, are comfortable with the non-linearity of it. One thing that Julie and I do often to inform our work is we use implementation science as the core of our work, but we also draw on other fields to be able to inform how we approach problems because we just think that like if you have a problem, you use whatever tools you can that are necessary to be able to address that problem. And so to envision leadership, we often draw on system science, which talks about the fact that it's better to facilitate and support change rather than try to make that change happen yourself. And that's the best and sustainable way. You're allowing the conditions to happen to allow change to emerge, to allow people to like find the reason and the why behind the change. And that's the most sustainable way for it to happen. So the role of the leader now is to help people find that vision and to help people find that why and not to be the mandator and the person who like is the primary enforcer of change. And I think that as Julia was saying, a lot of this is relational. A lot of this is, depends on power dynamics and relationships. And I think viewing leadership as the stimulant behind those relationships and as a support role rather than the enforcement role can really help people make sustainable change. That's the way we've seen it in our courses, in our workshops, in all of our services. That's how we talk about leadership. And I think that is definitely contributed to a mindset shift amongst a lot of people.
I love that.
This whole
And if
conversation
you
makes me think of that meme where the guy asks, "Who wants change?" Everyone raises their hand. And then the next question, "Who wants to lead change?" And the room is empty.
Yeah.
Finding those leaders is really challenging. So I'm curious, what do you wish leaders were asking more about in this space, but you don't really see?
So wait, I think the first thing is we're talking about leaders as like one group, but Sobi and I talk a lot about how like there's leaders at all these different levels, right? So it's like the reality is there's some fascinating new research that's come out that like mid-level managers are the ones who are actually making the most change happen. And those are the most integral people to making change
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
Right. So, like, I think that those mid level managers are the people that we need to be supporting. We need to be building their competencies. We need to be giving them resources and tools and teams to be helping them enact change because they are kind of stuck in the middle, right? They have to go navigate up, they have to navigate down, but you know what I mean? Like all the different directions. So, I think that that group often are struggling, has been our experience, and they are ready for help and kind of ready to embrace new things. And so, in fact, as Sobia mentioned, implementation science competencies, this is a group that has been ready to jump on board. They want help. They know this is challenging. Then I think that there's a group of higher level leaders where it's more about understanding the complexities of some of the changes that they're trying to make and recognizing that this is not going to be a linear process. This is not going to be a one and done, right? Like this is an ongoing process that is going to need ongoing support. And I think that a lot of people think of change these days as like a check mark rather than this ongoing relationship they're going to have in order to sustain things.
And I think it's a project.
Yeah, they think yeah, so we refuse to use the word project
Try
because
not
it,
to
like,
use
has a
that.
start and an end.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think this is a topic that is near and dear to both Preston and my heart. So we could dig into it for a long, long time. We do have to start wrapping up though. So I'm curious, what is the best way for our listeners to engage with the Center for Implementation or to connect with the two of you?
So we have a great website, and I would say go to the centerforimplementation.com. We're currently in the middle of revising some of the things that we have on our website, but there's a lot of information there in terms of what implementation science is, how it can help you, what we do specifically, how we support people, and there are ways that you can connect with us through our website. There's social media, and so we are on LinkedIn. We are on X, although we're reconsider. But our primary mode of communication, or the primary way that people tend to get in touch with us, is through LinkedIn. And so you can follow the TCI_CA on LinkedIn to be able to connect with us.
I want to say thank you to you both. This has been an amazing conversation. I wish we had another hour or two to dig into this, but we don't. For everyone else who's made it all the way to the end, as always, while you're going down there and clicking that 5th star for the 5-star rating, take a moment, leave a comment down there and let us know kind of where are your challenges with implementation? How are you struggling with change, and where do you feel like leadership could level up a little bit? And maybe even better, if you know someone who's going through some change who could use some support from the Center for Implementation or Sobia and Julia, share this episode with them, and spread the knowledge. So, Sobia, Julia, thank you again. This was absolutely fantastic. For everyone else who made it all the way to the end, we'll see you next time. And that's pretty much it. So, thank you guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.